Alright everybody, so this is the spoiler discussion for Batman the Killing Joke. I'm going to start from the beginning of the movie, which is like the new added prologue material, which has not only my favorite part of the movie, but is also the controversial portion of the movie because it has the bat sex scene in it. Me personally, I didn't care. I was shocked by it because it's Batman and Batgirl, and of course she's a grown woman. So it's not like it's illegal or anything, and it's kind of weird, but for the most part, even when she becomes Batgirl, she's older than, obviously she's older than Dick when he becomes Robin. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's weird because he's always kind of the mentor, excuse me, but it happened, and I was like, for me personally, I was like, it didn't matter, and of course that, for people, because it's the Killing Joke, and it's always been under controversy a little bit because Batgirl, especially without the prologue thing, I see how people could say, like, Batgirl is basically just a plot device to be used to fuel the fight between Batman and Joker. And it makes way more sense if you take off the whole 30-minute prologue where she's actually a big chunk of that first story and she is the main hero, really, going up against the Paris France guy. If you take all of that out, it makes a lot of sense when people say she's basically just a plot device, because she really isn't in that story whatsoever until the part where she gets shot. Like, I don't think she's even in the story. When I think about it, it's like, man, you take off that 30-minute thing, she's literally only in there as Barbara Gordon. She's not even Batgirl in the story. She's just Barbara Gordon, and she gets shot, and that's all there is to it. Like, she's not even in the story as Batgirl if you take out that 30-minute portion of the Killing Joke. So I understand how that may have been an issue for people with the controversialness of them having sex, and it's not just the fact that it's their relationship, which might be weird for some people, but it is also the fact that after that, it's kind of like Bruce just took off. He was like almost like the douchebag guy who's like, ooh, banged her and I gotta take off. So I understand how it got some controversy and stuff like that, because it was, even when I was watching, I was like, oh, that's a little weird. Like, they have this moment, and then Batman just takes off. Like, I know he's emotionally distant, but if there was ever a time for him to be out of character, to be closer to someone, it makes sense for it to be right after he had, an emotional moment where he sleeps with someone. You think right after that, you totally give a pass to Batman for being more emotional. It's like, it makes perfect sense. He had this emotional moment where they had sex, and then he went right back to being typical Batman, where he was just super distant 100%. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucked to me. And I thought that was just a part of the whole story. And then I found out it was kind of like that to fit in with the Killing Joke thing. And they kind of add that in later on where it's like, oh, I understand, you have to go. I understand what it's like, when they do the disappearance of Batgirl during the prologue thing. It's like, I understand why it has to be this way, because it's one thing to protect the entire city, but it's different when you have to protect one person that you truly care about. And I was like, it makes sense why she left and stuff like that. And I just assumed, because I didn't know, that all of that was actually a part of the story. And then after I saw the movie, and I was like, I wonder what other people thought, because of my feelings towards it, where it was like, it wasn't super epic like I thought it was going to be, which it's the Killing Joke and all this. And I went out of it like, it was a cool movie, but if you've seen like Son of Batman, that junk is awesome. So, like that, that's kind of where I was at, where it's like, it's this story that's just decades and decades, and I left out of it like, man, I kind of like the more recent movies, the other, like New 52 Batman movies, more than I like this one. So, it was one of those things, and that's why I looked it up, and it was like, oh, none of that stuff was even in there. Like, France, or Franz, whatever his name is, Francesco, or Francesca, I don't care, the douchebag guy. I liked him as a villain because he was really funny, but he could hold his own at least a little bit against Batgirl. He was able to have a couple fights with her, and that's what I liked. I was like, this is a guy who's kind of messing with her mentally, and she wants to prove a point that he doesn't get to her, but he kind of does, but not in the way that he thinks. Like, he's constantly just like, this woman's super hot and badass, and I want to be with her, and he kind of feels like he's getting closer to that, and that's why, like Batman mentions, like, he doesn't fear you. He kind of just wants to taunt you. And even though Batgirl is in this point where it's like she isn't being controlled by him, but she has to prove almost to Bruce that she's not being controlled, is kind of, it's like a weird cycle thing, and I thought that was perfect. I actually enjoyed that part of the movie, and I thought it made a lot of sense. I was like, that's actually kind of cool, and you can see, like, as she goes through it, like, she's driven to take this guy out on her own, but clearly she's smart enough to actually take this guy out on her own. Like, she's able to do it, and she actually does back off after they have a, a crazy, well, mostly after they have sex, they, actually back off. And then, of course, she goes in and saves Batman because he's about to get his butt destroyed. And she goes in and she takes him out, and she has that really dark moment. And it's like, okay, this kind of fits in with the theme and how she almost reached that dark point and had that moment with Bruce. That's why she left, and we know it's going to lead into yet another really deep, dark moment for Bruce because of what happens with the Joker. And I really enjoyed that. Like, the sex scene, like I said, it didn't bother me. With the controversy that it has and people feeling like she may have just been pining over Bruce after the sex scene, I didn't feel it was that way, except for the one scene when she's actually on the phone where it's like she was calling him and stuff like that. I felt like that was the only thing, because she was like, you don't care, I don't care, but it was clear, like, the way they had Tara Strong do the voice, it was like clearly she cares a little bit. So it was like, that was the only thing I was like, oh, that kind of sucks, because you can tell that she's upset by it, but she's acting like it doesn't matter. And I maybe because I felt that was really typical, and just in general, whether it's a man or a woman, they do that in TV a lot, or comics or anything. They kind of do that a lot, like, oh, we screwed up, who gives a crap? But, like, obviously one person here cares more than the other person, and you can always tell in TV shows, and maybe that's why it bothered me a little bit more, because it's like, oh, well, that's somewhat generic to me, because it's really obvious. But outside of that, it didn't really bother me at all. And then, it goes into the actual Killing Joke portion of the story. And honestly, like I said, I wasn't blown away by it. Like, it's this whole super epic story and everything. And it has some really epic moments just visually. It has some of the coolest things you could possibly see. Like, when when Joker first sees his face after he comes out of the chemical thing, it's just cool. Like, that was a great scene, and some of the other stuff they do where it's close-ups of his face, and the scene where technically it wasn't Joker, but it was the guy dressed like him, and all you could see, it was like where his eyes were, it was black, but you could kind of see like the white outline of his face. He was almost like the Punisher skull a little bit when you think about it. That looked cool. Like, they just had some of those moments. I was like, visually, he looks effing insane, and I love that. He looks insanely creepy, and it was just really cool, and I thought that was great. And the story itself is a classic story, so I knew it, and I mentioned this in my regular review. I think that's why it didn't, like, blow me away, because if this was brand new, that would have been insane. Like, people are, then I'm sure that's why it's such a big deal. Outside of the controversy, it's still, because it wasn't even meant to be canon, actually, and they made it canon because it was like this crazy thing, so they technically made it canon after that. And I don't know if that's when Oracle first came up, or what the deal was, but I think it was, because that's kind of the origin of how she became Oracle. And they basically made that canon. That wasn't really meant to be the thing, but they made it canon, and at the end of The Killing Joke, Batman does kill the Joker. Like, that's supposed to be what happens. And that was kind of my one disappointment with the movie, because I was like, with it being The Killing Joke, I know initially the point was, it ends on a subtle note, but you can tell, because if you look at the dialogue, Batman and Joker are both laughing, and so Joker has the ha-ha laugh, and Batman has, like, the hee-hee laugh. And they're both laughing. I think it's the whole final page. And so they're laughing, and then they have Batman put his hands on Joker's neck, or just on his shoulders, and so he's still laughing, and it goes to the next panel, it's like, at their feet, they're both laughing, and then it goes all the way down to the water and some light, and Joker's not laughing anymore, and it's just Batman laughing, and then the light goes away, and it's just Batman laughing, and then the final thing is just no one's laughing. And it was because that was meant to be Batman killing the Joker. And I knew that that was supposed to be the ending only because of the actual writer mentioning that, and I saw a video and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It was meant to be vague, but not super vague, because it's kind of there in the dialogue. But in the movie, it was 2 seconds long, and that's what bothered me, because I'm like, no one's going to get that if they didn't know that. Like, if I didn't know that, which I think I only found out like a few months ago, if I didn't know that, I would have thought the same thing. Like, when it ended, my girlfriend was just like, what? Like, that's it? Because it just ended so abruptly, because it was like, it takes 2 seconds for them to laugh and for them to cut, compared to you read it and you look at each panel and you see the, the two laughs fade into one laugh and then all the light fades away and it's just Batman and then it's nothing. That was like 2 seconds long. I was like, it seemed so short to me when they're laughing, and it seemed, especially like I said, for people that didn't know the story, I think that's why it's the worst part. I was like, they should have just made it where he actually choked him, and I know that would have technically changed the ending, because I don't. It's kind of hard to say because it was meant to not be canon. It was meant to just be sort of an Elseworld story, I guess, where he kills Joker at the end, and it was just an epic story. But they made it canon, so it was like, no, he didn't kill him. It just ended that way, and that's it. But he was supposed to have killed him, and that's why it's the killing joke. And Batman ends all of it, and he's the one, because the whole thing is about Joker trying to change Jim by torturing him and having shot his daughter and taking the pictures of her nude. But Batman is the one who ends up changing, and they have the dialogue and all that stuff early on when he's talking to the person who's not actually Joker. And I just wish they kind of made it more obvious that he did it. And I wish that they just flat out did it where he actually killed him at the end. And I think it would have made more sense, but I know that they were following the actual story of the comic where it kind of just fades away, but it seemed too fast. And it's Batman laughing, and they're both laughing, and it's just like, ha ha ha, and then it kind of just ends with them laughing. I was like, that's way too short. Like, I think it does have the transition where it's just Batman laughing for a second, but then it ends, and I'm like, that was like 3 seconds long, 2 or 3 seconds long after it fades away from them, and it's like, ha ha ha, and it's Batman laughing by himself, and then it cuts. And I was like, nobody's gonna get that, because it was so freaking fast. That was like my one big issue. I was like, they shouldn't have ended it that way. They should have just done it where maybe it was super vague, or they do like I said, and this is them changing it, and I understand that's why they didn't, but I feel like that almost did a disservice to the story itself by not actually letting people realize, because it was vague even in the comic, but it's way more obvious compared to the 2 seconds it takes to just have the voice actors laugh and then stop laughing. So I kind of wish they just showed in a silhouette form or something, like a lightning strike, and you just see Batman is laughing and the Joker's not laughing anymore. Because for a second I thought they were gonna have that where like the Joker fell over, or you heard like a body thump or something like that, and that's how they'd end it. But they ended it just like the comic, and I felt it didn't work because it was too fast. And when you do, obviously in comic form, you read it much slower than you would just hear it and see it. Plus that whole final page takes place within the span of a couple seconds, but it's you looking at every little detail that makes it take much longer, and you're allowed to understand what's going on. So that was my biggest gripe, really, was the ending. And I was like, I know this is exactly the ending, but with it being animated, it was way too fast, and I don't think anybody actually caught it. It was Batman laughing with the Joker, and that makes no sense, and then it kind of just went off, and I'm like, that was kind of a crappy ending. Even though it's the exact ending from the comic, it just didn't translate to me as far as animation. And clearly it didn't translate perfectly, because my girlfriend, who didn't know the story, was just like, what? Like, that's the end of the movie, and she didn't exactly enjoy that. So it clearly didn't translate perfectly, and that was really my one biggest gripe with it. Like I said, as far as the action and stuff goes, I'm an action fan, and even when Batman does get very serious, I can enjoy it, but that's one of those things. Sometimes that stuff doesn't transfer over. Sorry that went off. I don't even know. I just got a new phone, so I don't know if that was my new phone or my old phone that just went off. I think it was my old phone. So it's one of those things where it's like, some stuff just translates well, and there are a lot of moments from this comic that certainly do, and then there's just that ending with it being such a short little moment where it's like, this is weird. Batman's laughing at Joker's joke, which is, if you saw the movie, it was a stupid joke too, and it was a really dumb joke, and I thought it was gonna end because I didn't know like how the actual ending looked. I just knew how it ended, but I thought it was gonna end where it's like, oh, Batman kind of smirks at him and stuff, and Joker would continue laughing, and then something happened. But then Batman just bursts out laughing, and they're both just laughing like crazy, and it seems really awkward for people that see it, and then it ends, and like, that's just my biggest gripe with it, honestly. Like, I know people have the whole controversy with the bat sex, and I'm just like, I just didn't like the ending. Like, I know the bat sex thing was weird, and for a lot of people, it was weird, even though technically in the animated series universe, they did have a relationship. If you watch Batman Beyond, and I only remember this because I read a comment about it, I wouldn't have remembered that otherwise, but they actually did have a relationship in the Batman Animated Series universe when they do Batman Beyond. Terry, when he goes to Barbara, she actually mentions that at one point that they had a failed relationship. So I thought that was kind of cool. I thought that was interesting that it kind of fit in there and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting. That's kind of how they played it. But ultimately, I still enjoyed the film. I just kind of wish that the ending itself was more obvious, honestly, because it was one of those things that obviously I'm only 23, so I wasn't around when the comic was, first made and when people first read this story and were blown away by it. I don't know who understood the ending or didn't understand the ending at the time, but I feel like it's started all over again, and with it having been so quick, I feel like more people are going to be left wondering, well, why did it end that way, and thinking it was a crappy ending. And that's the problem with it. Like, it's the exact ending of the story, so I'm kind of fine with it. But and it's a weird standpoint because I'm personally fine with it because I know how the story ends. But if I didn't, I know I'd have an issue with it, just like a lot of people do. So it's almost like I have an issue with it because I know other people do. And personally, I do feel like it just wasn't translated too well. Like, that's the one thing I think they may have needed to make a bit more obvious. Maybe not super obvious, but do something like a silhouette. I don't think they even had the light. If I remember right, I'm pretty sure there wasn't even, like in the comic book, where there's light and then the light fades away and stuff like that, which I believe was meant to be, the light fades away because maybe Joker's body falls over the light and that's complete shadow and stuff. I don't think they even had that. I think it just pans down and it's like 2 seconds and it's Batman laughing. There's none of the light or any of that stuff, and I could be wrong because it was like 2 to 3 seconds long. So, if anything happened, I only noticed Batman laughing, and I was looking for the symbols of, like, how are they going to show that he dies? And then there was nothing. It just went off, and all you hear is rain. So I wish that the ending was just a bit more obvious for people, because it just ends, and it just didn't seem to really fit. Excuse me. And overall, it just wasn't super epic like you might think it was, which was another disappointment, because with people touting it as like the craziest thing, like one of the best stories ever, you would think it would kind of be like The Dark Knight Returns, which has all that craziness in it, but it does actually still have a lot of cool moments where there's action in it that you can simply enjoy. It's really just a lot of talking, and it's not as epic as I thought it was going to be, where it's like this crazy story. It's just some crazy stuff happens in it. And maybe because of the oversaturation of how popular the story is, that's kind of what downplays the idea. And even for people that don't know everything from it, I think people know at least the Barbara thing where she gets shot. They might not have known the roller coaster stuff, which I knew ahead of time, and Joker dying at the end, which that's the only reason I even liked the ending, was because I was like, well, at least I know he died, and I still felt it was a crappy ending because it was too fast. Like, no one would even be able to recognize what happened during that ending or what was meant to have happened. And that's how it was, because it's the Killing Joke. I think a lot of people may have assumed that someone would die in it, and that was the whole point of the story, is that it does end with Batman killing the Joker. And it didn't seem to translate too well because it was way too fast to me, animation wise, and clearly to other people as well. So it's unfortunate that it didn't like blow people's minds and stuff like that, but I still think it was a fun movie. I still enjoyed it, but I did like that first half more because I was like, this has the cool action to it. We get to see some fighting, but we still get the Batman dialogue and context of these characters trying to figure out how they're going to work together and be partners when one person is clearly in control over the other and stuff like that. And I love that. I was like, this is really typical Batman. And then we went into not so typical Batman, which was still cool because the Joker was freaking amazing. But at the same time, I didn't really give a crap, honestly, about the Batman stuff. It was only like everything with Joker was super sweet, and anything outside of Joker, including his flashbacks. Like, his flashbacks were fine, but I knew I wouldn't, they didn't like really blow me away. It was still cool to see that though. But everything with Joker was super epic, and then everything else just wasn't as epic. And I think that was the biggest thing about it. Like, everything Joker did was so crazy that anything that wasn't Joker after they did the prologue thing was really lackluster almost in comparison. And I think that was kind of the biggest thing that I had. Like, Joker's on, I'm having a great freaking time. As soon as it goes away from Joker, it's still psychological, but it's just sad stuff because it's him shooting Barbara and stuff like that. It's not like crazy Joker moments. It's just sad real life moments. It's like, not having a super awesome time with this. It's not like a crazy cool experience. It's just, the crazy moment's over, and now it's the real moment, and it was just like, that kind of sucks. Still, some of the stuff is obviously still entertaining to watch. It's not like I hated the movie or anything, but that's just how I felt about it. It didn't. It's one of those things where you think it'll blow your mind, and it just didn't. Like, it really didn't. And I like the stuff that they created outside of the Killing Joke more than I even like the Killing Joke storyline itself, and that's probably not too great. So that's just where I stand on the movie. I still enjoyed it, but this is one of those things I went to the movies to see, and I was like, I kind of would have rather just waited and have admittedly just torrented it and just seen it for free, because I was like, it just didn't really do that much for me. I loved the beginning, and I was like, this is awesome. And then once I got to the actual Killing Joke, it wasn't super awesome to me anymore. It was just like, this is cool. And the Joker stuff at points is awesome, and he looks awesome is what I was thinking more than even the moment. So it was just like, he looks awesome. Like when after he shoots Barbara, the scene where he has like basically a dot for an eye, probably like my favorite moment, because it's one of the craziest looks you ever see for Joker in all of comics. And that's why, this story is always talked about for art and stuff. Just some of the scenes, just looking at them, is honestly one of the best parts of the entire movie. Just seeing the darkest looks they've ever created for the Joker. So that's where I stand. Would love to know what you guys think about the bat sex, the story in general, if you read the story and how the movie translated it. If you never read the story, but maybe you were kind of like me where you knew Barbara died, or Barbara was shot, you knew about the roller coaster scene, and you knew that Joker died, or any, mix and match, or however you knew about this story, or whatever you knew, would love to know how you guys felt this movie really translated once it got animated. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.